Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of Trine Time Astrology. And today we're going to be discussing a very, very interesting topic, which is the full moon in Gemini on the 3rd of December 2017, which is a very interesting astrological aspect because full moons are always interesting, especially to you guys, because we get way more views on our full moon videos than we do on any other videos, which we think are more interesting. But that's up to you.
That's true.
Oh my God.
Anyway, this full moon is very interesting. Besides the fact that it's in my personal favorite sign, I'm sorry that I kind of discriminate between signs, and this is my favoriteest sign of all. It's a full moon in Gemini. There's certain similarities to the last full moon in Taurus. Very interesting. Mercury is going to go retrograde about 9 hours before this full moon. Many other interesting things that we are going to talk about in this video. So stick around and hit the subscribe button before you forget. So, guys, what would we say about this full moon in Gemini? Who would like to start? I get to pick. Okay. So, James.
Yeah, so I feel like this is payback for all the times that I catch both of you off guard. First of all, I'd say that it's really interesting to see that there are these all of these aspects to Neptune, because both the sun and the moon are square Neptune. Neptune's at 11 degrees of Pisces, and I mean, it's almost even exact. It's very close. And then Jupiter is making an almost exact trine to Neptune. And so...
well, that's huge, actually.
It makes me wonder, especially since Neptune is in Jupiter's sign, and, the sun is in Jupiter's sign. And so it's like, well, what is Jupiter doing? And that would be in the 12th house, whole sign house, if the sun, if we place the sun in the first house. And so, this makes me think there's something regarding, either freeing people from prison or people losing freedom, or something to do with this idea of bondage and freedom. And Jupiter representing some sort of like either liberation, but it's probably like, as we've been seeing, liberation of the truth and setting the truth free, and kind of like shining through all of our illusions or fantasies, or idealism, and having to face the truth about some difficult things.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that's very insightful. And Lars, what would you say?
Well, first, did we want to share the chart to the screen or no?
Well, I can if you want me to, or you can.
I can do it.
Yeah, Alex had it up, so let's just do that real quick.
The more Vedic-ish approach to this chart. And now this is the just because I mentioned Vedic, this is not sidereal. This is tropical, guys. So here's the chart right here, and then we have it in the divisionals. Maybe we'll touch a bit on those as well. So
cool.
Lars, what do you think?
Yeah, so kind of lost my train of thought for a second. Oh yeah, so that's really cool, the T square with Neptune at the apex. And then Dane Rudyard actually talks about, with regard to triangles and T squares and stuff, that if there's like a planet, as there is here, Jupiter, trine to the T square, it sort of like represents kind of like a point where the energies can be like channeled to as well. So maybe we can talk about that, because I definitely like to return to the T square and Neptune. But my thoughts were kind of more with the moon being in the nakshatra of Rohini, and then the packed 7th house, if we take the moon's sign as the ascendant. And so first of all, Rohini is like can be a very like sexy nakshatra. The nakshatra that follows it is Mrigashira, which I might be mispronouncing, but it's sort of like, they're both like very sexy nakshatras, and Rohini is like very much about like passion and creativity, and it's ruled by Brahma, who in one myth lusts after his wife / daughter that he creates. So those themes are kind of there. And then in the Jyotish tradition too, Gemini is associated with like sex and games and fun, because it's not twins. For those of you who are like, oh, ew, gross, it's incest. No, it's not. It's not twins in the Jyotish tradition. It's just a man and a woman. They're not necessarily related, or at least I hope they're not related. So and then in the 7th house, like in the last full moon chart we had, okay, like in the last full moon chart we had, which was a Taurus full moon, we have a packed 7th house, and we have the Atmakaraka Mercury, right, the soul planet, and Mercury was actually Atmakaraka in that last chart too. And then we also have Venus as the Darakaraka, which is the significator of the spouse, because it's the planet with the lowest degree, and it's combust. And again, that was literally happening in that last chart. Jupiter, the Lord of the 7th, is in the 6th. That was happening in that last chart. So we have some similar themes. I don't think it's necessarily quite the soulmate kind of stuff that we saw before, but there's definitely a lot of like potential activity, for relationships and sexual stuff, especially since Venus is combust there. And, Venus is the planet of sexiness and stuff as well. So I guess my 2 cents for now is just like sexiness.
Well,
so.
I'm going to, and that's a very good point about Rohini. And Rohini is a very, a very nice nakshatra. Like in this video, we were talking about Mula, and then before that, we were talking about, what was it? All of these horrible nakshatras that just produce like misfortune and sadness and destruction and all this stuff. But Rohini is a beautiful nakshatra. It's not only the nakshatra of sensuality, it's the nakshatra of fertility, of plenitude, of all of this beautiful stuff, right? Getting out and smelling the flowers. So it's a very beautiful nakshatra to tap into, that the moon taps into, to channel this energy for this event. But what I would add to what you said about the themes, like we saw many themes from many people with the previous Taurus full moon, which had all the elements in place to prove itself very significant for romantic, intimate partnerships, soulmate connections.
Yeah,
I would add to that this is a subject that I plan to discuss more in detail in the future. But I would add that the difference between Libra and Gemini when it comes to relationships, both are about some kind of relationship, some kind of connection. As you mentioned in Jyotish, Gemini is about, is about the sexual intercourse, about the games of sexual intercourse, about games in general, curiosity as well. But back to the theme of partnership, I see Gemini. So Libra is this relationship where things need to be kept in balance. You need to give this much in the relationship, and then the other person has to counter that with as much attention, as much effort, as much whatever commitment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the balance is lost, and there's no more relationship between the two. The relationship is lost.
Yeah.
Gemini is that kind of connection, and within inherent in the symbolism of Gemini, it implies that the connection is unbreakable, like between twins. You cannot break that connection, right? So the kind of connection that comes with Gemini is kind of an unbreakable connection. It's not subject to conditions like the relationships of Libra are, right? Where they're more of agreements. They're more like a balancing act between two parties, where if the balance is broken, the relationship is broken.
Right. No, plus the man in the Gemini symbol has a club. So things could get pretty hairy there. all
the more reason for the female to cooperate.
Oh God!
What are we talking about? But seriously, like without getting too misogynistic here.
Keyword 2.
Gemini, really, I see it as this kind of connection where you have a friendship. It is a sign of friendship as well because it's ruled by Mercury. It's a sign of childlike nature and childlike interaction. It's a sign of innocent interaction. Even when we talk about sex, it is a sign of like a more innocent kind of sex than Libra is, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this kind of connection of Gemini is unbreakable. It's unconditional. It's sincere. And I think for some, not for all, there are these themes that are going to play out with this full moon, especially since the full moon usually brings up seventh house themes, since the sun and the moon are seventh one from another. But also the theme of Rohini helps here with all that beauty, with all that sensuality, with all that comfort that Rohini brings. And on the other hand, this may also be a good sign financially for some, and a good time to start revisiting one's financial situation, since Mercury is just going retrograde 9 hours before this full moon actually occurs. So
in Mula.
just in Mula, yeah, and then we have Rohini on the other side. So what can be? It's kind of like, it's almost like one part of your stability is being demolished with Mula, and then Rohini kind of, but here's this more beautiful thing that you can have, right? If you kind of
creation and destruction,
rearrange things right during this Mercury retrograde. So that's kind of my thoughts on this.
Cool.
James, did you have anything that you would like to share?
Well, I think that going back to the images associated with Gemini, I personally see it as just like a symbol of like the divine masculine and divine feminine, instead of like, definitely nothing about, misogynism or anything like that, but just about the idea that, there are two parts of our nature in which we have.
And one has a club.
Okay, so two parts of our nature in which, we have the power to, either defend or to protect, and then we also have the power to nurture and to care for. And so, like, two parts of our mental state and our mental drive, actually, literally having nothing to do with human gender itself, but rather like what's intrinsic to each person. And instead of gender or anything like that. But regardless of that, issue of like Gemini and what Gemini's sign and symbols might represent, I think that it's equally important to note that Mars is sextile both Saturn and Mercury within 2 or 3 degrees, and Mercury is in Libra. And so then we get this, idea of partnerships again and how we relate to other people. And, do we feel like our partnerships in life are helping us to grow, or are they limiting us and making us feel like we're being held back in some way? And so, and so how important it is to communicate what it is that you really want and what it is you're thinking about in your partnerships, so that you can move forward in the way that serves you best and also serves the other people best. So since a lot of this is to do with like speaking truth and sharing your beliefs and your personal stances on things, I think that a lot of people will be encouraged to be honest and open with the people in their lives, so that they can have a constructive experience in partnerships rather than feeling like they're being restricted or restrained or held back in some way.
Nice.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's very beautifully said. Lars, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, well, that kind of makes me think about Saturn, Mercury, which we talked about a bit last week. And Saturn, is kind of potentially like bashing Mercury over the head with a club. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. It's just a bad joke. But no, seriously, basically what it really brings me back to, though, is like this notion that if we read the moon as the ascendant, we have the 12th lord Venus in the 7th house, and the 7th lord Jupiter is in the 6th house. And the Atma Karaka is Mercury again, and that's in Sagittarius. And in the Navamsha chart, which is the ninefold division, Mercury and Saturn also end up again in Sagittarius. And I might have mentioned this the other week, but Gemini, the astrologer Gemini, associates Sagittarius with like shooting really high and having a fall from some kind of height. He says like a fall from like a vehicle or a height. And so to me, there's like this theme with the 7th house of like shooting really high with regard to like your goals and your relationships and how you're perceived by the public, because the 7th has to do very much with the public and how you're perceived by them, right? And this is just the proverbial you or the proverbial we, whatever. So there's this theme of like shooting really high for certain things, certain ideas about life, possibly excluding other ideas that don't fit with your own, especially with regard to relationships, partnerships, and sex. And then there's the definite possibility to be kind of disappointed by what transpires because of that 12th house, 6th house exchange. Plus, coming back to the T-square with Neptune, you know, when it's at the apex of a T-square, it often creates what I call self-martyrdom syndrome, which is basically where the person's like sacrificing themselves and their well-being to help others, but they're not doing it selflessly often. And so they expect something in return, and then they just feel continually let down, but they don't understand because they're doing all this good for people. And so that could definitely be a theme here in our collective lives. And then Pluto is also conjoined to the sun and conjoined to the moon by Antisha, which is a kind of an ancient doctrine that has to do with like mirroring signs between the celestial axis. But they're pretty close to being conjunct, Sun and Pluto. And then the opposite to that would of course be the moon. So Pluto kind of makes a statement here as well. And I feel like that Pluto really fits in well with like the stuff about Mula Nakshatra, taking things back down to the root, dissolution, often in a destructive manner. And perhaps too with this 12th house, 6th house theme that I noticed. So it's not all bad or anything though. I mean, Jupiter's conjunct the star Alphecca, which is the brightest star in the crown, Corona Borealis, that constellation. So that's actually a very auspicious star. But I don't have necessarily too much else to say, so I'm gonna pass it along, and then maybe we'll come back to that.
Right. Well, I think that's all beautifully said, and it is all quite interesting. There's 2 points that I want to touch on that you guys kind of covered. I'm not sure if my own face appears here while I'm talking, because it seems that.
No, I think it is.
All right.
Yes.
So,
yes.
You're highlighted.
Oh, okay. I wasn't highlighted on my screen. So anyway, the deal is this. 2 points. First of all, James beautifully said about the issue of our masculine, feminine, intrinsic qualities. I was actually thinking about that, and I do agree with that 100%. I do think there will be such a theme, so it won't necessarily have to do, again, if it's this unbreakable relationship that I spoke about, it does tie into what you said, because there is always this unbreakable relationship between our own internal individual masculine and feminine polarities within ourselves. And Gemini does represent that. It's a dual sign. It's ruled by the most dual planet, right? Mercury can be benefic, can be malefic, can be masculine, can be feminine. Those are the qualities of Mercury. And the Gemini is the perfect, the perfect product of that perfect symmetry of Mercury. And so I do agree that there is going to be a lot going on when it comes to our own manifestation of our masculine and feminine, maybe balancing our masculine and feminine, learning how to express our masculine and feminine, but again, in a playful way, because Gemini is a sign of playfulness, and the nakshatra of Rohini supports this. Now, to touch on what Lars said, on the other side, we have the doom and gloom. We have Saturn, we have Mula. So how do we kind of connect this together? Like on the one side, there's Gemini, there's the playful, there's the masculine and feminine, there's the unconditional innocence of such connections. There's Rohini, the nakshatra of sensuality and pleasure and beauty. And then there's this seemingly horrible thing on the other side. Well, that really enforces the theme of polar opposition, especially with Mercury going retrograde opposite to this. And Mercury is going retrograde with Saturn from Mula, as we discussed in the previous video. And in case you haven't seen that, guys, there should be a link down below where you can watch that video. But really, Mercury and Saturn, I don't see them as working against one another. Actually, I'm quite happy to see Mercury and Saturn together in transit, or maybe not so much in a natal chart, but in transit. For me, it's usually a good omen to see Mercury and Saturn together, because all this planning, all these ideas, all these thoughts, all this, plan that you have on paper that Mercury produces, then with Saturn, here comes the commitment to, okay, now I'm actually, tomorrow I'm waking up at this hour and I'm starting to implement it this way, and I'm doing this, and then I'm doing that, and I'm just going to be relentless until this comes out as I want it. So kind of Mercury and Saturn kind of have the potential to produce this effect. Of course, Saturn here may also highlight the theme of, inhibiting communications, causing misunderstandings and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, there's a vast array of things that could manifest. And of course, this will depend a lot on the individual's natal chart. But really, overall, this should be a very interesting aspect, and one that is full of great potential for just about anyone. So with this, on this note, I'm going to pass it along to James.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the things that I was talking, or I think I commented on someone's Facebook post about the Mercury-Saturn conjunction. And of course, Mercury is incredibly important in this lunar event, because Mercury is the ruler of the full moon. But someone said something about, maybe it being difficult to do some things or something. But what I said was, I find this to be incredibly constructive, adding structure to my thought process, bringing form to my thoughts. And, being able to get practical things from what I've been thinking about and exploring, rather than just this never-ending, thought process or thought experience. And so, I think that since Mercury is, stationing retrograde, I think that a lot of it is about planning, especially since Saturn is there too. So there's a more intensified focus on planning, assessing, reassessing, and making sure that you have your ducks in a row. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted, before you embark on some sort of committed experience. Like Sagittarius being this idea of long journeys. Well, this is okay, so I'm planning for this long journey. Okay, what do I need? So let me make a list and then check off everything on this list before I embark. That's kind of something that is being summoned up in my mind as I think about it. And I actually think that's a pretty good analogy is, do you really have everything together? Are you really ready for where you're wanting to go? And that's, also tied into Saturn's entire transit of Sagittarius. Is okay, you've got vision, and you've got some ideas about the future, but are you doing the practical things you need to do to make those things happen? Are you building structure around your long-term vision, or are you just being a dreamer? And so Saturn often asks us to do the practical, real-world work to get whatever reward that Saturn might have for you. Jupiter is more like Santa Claus, where it's or Oprah, I say Jupiter is kind of like Oprah, you know, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, and just, you know, and just
Totally.
like freely just giving away, like, you know, with lots of liberal access or excess. But Saturn being like, if you want something worthwhile, then you have to invest the time and the effort, and you have to do the work, and you get no breaks, you get no like shortcuts. You have to do it the right way, which means you have to follow the rules. And so
Sure.
this is a great time for people to really consider what those rules are and what steps you need to take to really implement all the things you've been thinking about.
Definitely.
Cool.
And that definitely, turns on many lights in my head. And I'll have something to contemplate on. So thank you for those thoughts. Those are valuable to me, and I'm sure they will be valuable to many other people. So Lars, what would you?
Well, I was thinking about what was coming into my mind was like actually how cool this Jupiter conjunct Alphega in the sixth house is in this chart. And at first I was like, oh man, that's really unfortunate that Jupiter's there. But then I started to realize like Jupiter there in this chart is kind of like a get out of jail free card in a way. It's like basically on the one hand, you know, accidents and mistakes that we could make in general during this full moon period, which, you know, depending on how you look at it, either lasts about 14 days till the next new moon or lasts about 30 days till the next full moon. I actually don't really know where I stand on that, but in any case, it's interesting because it's like accidents and mistakes and things that could happen you might get like rescued at the last minute type of thing, right? So it's actually a good time to like be willing to like fuck things up and you know, take that chance. You know, don't do anything stupid, but it's just like if you're worried about something going wrong that's risky, like this is maybe a good time to take that risk. But it also is kind of like the accidents and misfortunes that befall people during this period could also have like a silver lining of like getting you out of a potentially much worse situation than you could have been in. And it's interesting because yeah, James, you were just telling us about a chart you had read where something like that happened, right? Like the person like broke their arm and got fired, or not because they broke their arm, but
Well, I don't want to talk about I don't want to
we
talk
don't.
about that.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that person. Sorry, but it was similar to what I'm saying here. It's like something kind of bad happens, but then it turns out that bad thing is leading to something better. So that's all I'll say, respecting that confidentiality. And I also like this juxtaposition between Mula Nakshatra and Rohini, where like Mula is like destroying, taking things back down to the root. The goddess being Niriti, but then Brahma, the god of Rohini, wanting to like create and, you know, promote just like creation and joy and fun and passion and things like that. So, so I guess that's kind of what I saw.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that you know, I think we pretty much gave a pretty solid assessment of this full moon. And more will be up to the individual to kind of experience and you know, see how it manifests in their life. What I would add here is that you know, again, with that structure that we have on the seventh house, with Saturn being there and Mercury being retrograde, which will kind of make us reassess, rethink our strategy, and what James beautifully said about you know, judging whether we have what it takes to really implement or to start stepping in the direction that we want to move. I think that's a very valuable thing for many people to consider with this period, not only with this full moon, which may bring a highlight to this period, but again, you know, a full moon may also bring a bit of a haze over our eyes where we don't really see the realism of the situation, because a full moon does envelop us in that again, it's Gemini, it's Rohini, that's kind of lovely, beautiful, pleasurable energy. But only after the full moon passes will begin to realize, okay, there's something more down to earth and serious that I need to address. Like when this full moon kicks in, Mercury is just going retrograde. We do have this plan, we do have this initiative, we are determined to kind of start implementing it. And then comes the full moon, which gives us kind of optimism, gives us a taste of the rewards that are to come once we are successful. But then as the moon kind of decreases in light, it turns to the waning moon. Then we kind of realize, okay, wait, there's actually a discipline that I need to adopt. Like, that Rohini full moon was beautiful. It gave me a taste of the pleasures that I will experience. It gave me some, imagination, insights into what I'm aiming for. It gave me the positivity to actually dare to step in that direction. But now comes the time where I actually have to task myself into actually figuring out how am I going to do this, because it depends on what you want to do, but it may not be that easy. And Saturn usually demands a lot of from us if he is to grant us whatever our wishes. And a lot of this depends on Saturn. Remember that towards the end of this retrograde, Saturn moves to Capricorn, and that in itself is huge. And there's this kind of chain of astrological events beginning with Mercury retrograde, then there's the full moon, then there's the new moon in Sagittarius in the opposite sign, then Capricorn passes into Saturn passes into Capricorn. So I wouldn't really isolate any one of these astrological aspects. Like, this is the energy of the full moon. It's going to be beautiful for most people, but you have to look at it from the perspective of how does it tie into this chain of events that really has already begun with I would argue with the conjunction of Mercury and Saturn a few days ago. So I think if you keep in mind this whole chain of events and don't expect that beautiful and loving and pleasurable energy of the full moon in Gemini to really last and be forever, because it's the moon, it's going to shrink, it's going to grow, it's going to do the whole thing that the moon does. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on this.
Cool.
James.
Well, I just have two more thoughts I'd like to add, since I know that we're getting close to the end. First of all, I'm thinking about where is Jupiter in context to the sun and the moon. So, for example, if we were to have the sun in the first house, then Jupiter's in the 12th house. And I'm thinking of that as like you were talking about getting away with things, and I was thinking of this idea of like a get out of jail free card, like a Monopoly.
That's what I said, get out of jail free.
Oh, okay. I guess I just didn't hear that part. And, because that's literally what I thought too, is like this idea of, getting a free pass if you make a mistake or if you feel like you've gotten yourself in a bind, so I'm just echoing a lot of your thoughts on that. But then I'm thinking, well, if the moon is in the first house, if this were in the other perspective, then Jupiter is in the 8th house let's see. So
no, it's in the 6th.
In the 6th house. Okay, never mind. So, because the opposite 12 and 6. But so the 6th house being this idea of responsibilities. And so a freedom from some responsibilities that you perhaps have felt are, not things that you are enjoying. And so Jupiter giving you some freedom to have more fun and feel less like what you're doing is such a chore. So like all this constructive work you're doing, and fleshing out and bringing form to your thoughts, this will be something that doesn't feel like a chore, but is actually something that you will enjoy. And, because if you love what you do, then you never are working, right? That's like,
right.
What people say. So, looking at it from that perspective and thinking about what Jupiter will represent in the 6th house, I think is also liberating. in that, yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but it might not even feel like a lot. It might not feel like that. It might actually feel like that this is actually fun instead of being something that you just hate doing. So just wanted to throw that out there. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that there is a, let's see, I can't remember exactly if it's a lunar or solar eclipse on January 31st that happens at either 11 or 12 degrees of Aquarius. And so that kind of like ties into this, I think, because the sun and moon are, will be making aspects to that point. And I know that might seem kind of abstract thinking about it this way, but I think that this full moon is connected to that eclipse because of the degree points and how they make aspects to the degree of that eclipse at the end of January. And I know that that's getting into the future, but I'm bringing it up as a point of reference, so that way, whenever that eclipse happens, I think that if you look back at this upcoming lunation, there will be some very similar themes, or something that you started during this time will be coming to fruition during that eclipse.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's really cool to think about. When you were talking about Jupiter in the 6th or 12th, I started looking at the 10th house from the moon, which has Neptune in it. That's where the apex of that T-square occurs. And while the 6th house has to do with like kind of like what you were hinting at, like situations that are kind of like you feel like a slave or you feel oppressed by the things that you just are now having to do. Like if you broke your leg, you feel like imprisoned by having to be in a cast and use the crutches and slowly heal and all that. But it's interesting because then the 10th house is called Karma Bhava in Jyotish, and it deals with like your greatest like responsibility kind of in the world. That's kind of vague, but it's sort of like the major responsibilities that are being like heaped on you by tradition, by the social context you're in, and your karmas in general. So I think that Neptune could also speak to like feeling like people feeling like they have to sacrifice themselves to their work. They have to throw themselves into their work and like sacrifice their well-being to their what they perceive as their responsibilities or their public persona and things like that. And possibly, people might be seeking some kind of redemption in their work. And if that's the case, nothing in this world gives us redemption as far as I can tell. So, it might be wise to, if you're watching this video, take a step back and say, oh my God, I've been like caught in a fog in my work. I've been just like sacrificing all my time and energy to my work, thinking it's gonna like save my life or something. And so what is really going on, and that kind of a thing. So I guess that's kind of what I have to add there. Alex, you have a big grin on your face.
Yeah, I was just something you said sparked up this idea in my mind that I'm not going to share, but I'm going to share.
Very 12th house.
Yes.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, that's all very nice and very interesting full moon. I'm looking here that at the fact that in the Navamsha, Mercury and Saturn will be in the Navamsha of Sagittarius, so they're going to both be Vargotama. Besides the fact that
What is that?
Vargotama is when a planet is in the same division in the natal chart and usually in the D9 harmonic. But you can also consider Vargotama for different harmonics. So if it's in Sagittarius in the natal chart and it's in Sagittarius in the D9 harmonic, then it's considered to be Vargotama. And that gives a special tone to any planet or any event happening in Vargotama. It kind of links it more to the energy of that sign. So there is a very saggy thing about this retrograde in general. It's
saggy?
saggy.
You mean like sad? Like Sagittarius?
Yeah.
Or do you mean like, something is wet and soggy and then starts to sag? I don't know.
Well, whatever tickles your imagination, but
Oh my
I-
God.
since we're talking about Sagittarius, we're talking about saggy in that sense.
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius. Sagittarius. I don't know what a Terrius is, but it's saggy.
Sagittarisaurus, like a dinosaur.
Sagittarius, yeah.
Sagittarius Rex.
Yeah.
But I guess I would just say like saggy. Is that what you'd say? I've never like used it that way.
I would say saggy, but like each to their own.
Well, I'll never refer to myself as a saggy.
James, you're a very saggy dude. Like it just doesn't sound.
No,
all that.
No, not at all.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh
You guys are just discriminating on me because I'm not a native speaker of English.
Oh.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Okay, guys, don't why do you keep imitating my accent? Like, let's get over this.
Anyway. So
Okay,
finish your final thoughts, Alex.
I will, thank you. So basically
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Basically, there's this very saggy, are you happy? There's this very saggy influence to this Mercury retrograde. And especially what you spoke about, James, about this sag influence of aiming, about the journey, about the exploration that lies ahead, I think is very relevant. I know I have a lot to contemplate on based on some of the things that you guys said. And I can't wait for this full moon, because the full moon is always a period when I don't really do much. I just like to lay back and feel the energy. It kind of like rushes through my body in very strange ways. But of course,
What? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's just
I got you.
What happens. Like
in very saggy ways.
No, I totally know.
Ways.
I totally know what you're talking about.
It's not always saggy. Sometimes it happens in different ways, but I'm a Cancer sun, so my energy is very linked to the cycle of the moon. So anyone who's a Cancer sun will understand what I'm talking about. Anyone else will kind of
or Cancer rising or Cancer moon too.
Yeah, sure, but then with the sun, it's your energy, the energy that drives you, that is linked to the cycles of the moon. So your energy, your vitality, your core energy fluctuates with the moon. With the moon in Cancer, it's more of your mood fluctuating, your emotions fluctuating. With your ascendant, it's kind of the way you behave. You may go into like the split personality thing with the moon cycles.
Right.
But with the sun, it's a very you feel it on a very energetic level. That's why I say I feel it in my body, not to allude to anything saggy or anything.
Well, and that's a good, that's a good thing to keep in mind too. I never really thought about this consciously, but if you just look at the planets that are in Cancer and maybe to a lesser extent Leo, and then you look at what houses those are too, especially if there's no planets in them. Those are the themes that may be getting highlighted during new and full moons for you. So like for me, Jupiter's in Cancer. So obviously, I haven't like tracked this, but I would think something to do with like, faith and God and religion and philosophy and all that good Jupiter
I wouldn't be surprised if you do see themes like this, but also, if it's not one of your main planets, look to your to the house that Cancer is in your chart. The activities of that house are going to fluctuate a lot.
Right. Or get highlighted or brought to your attention somehow.
Or be more like, for example, new moons and full moons, I like to do nothing at all. Full moons, I just feel the energy because it's often a rush of like yummy energy. It can depend, but usually it's yummy energy, and I expect this to be really yummy.
Nice.
With the new moon, I kind of just go introspect and kind of try to not mind anything in outer reality, kind of go Ketu, So yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts on this. A bit unrelated, that's all I have to add, because most of it you
Cool.
guys covered really beautifully, and I think we did a good job on this video. Anything you guys would like to add before we close?
Well, I'm trying to actually, like, I was thinking too about this. Like, there was an eclipse in, I think it was at like either 9 degrees Pisces, or when was that? There was an eclipse back in like September or something. That was in 9 degrees of Pisces or Virgo, September
Oh
of
yeah,
last
yeah.
year,
Mm-hmm.
like 2016.
Yes.
And so that might also be interesting to look back at, to see what was going on in your life, especially because, like, you know, Mercury was involved in that too, and that, you know, there was the Virgo dynamic of it. And so that just might be something that someone would want to, you know, consider, you know, what was going on last September, and then thinking about what's happening right now.
Yeah, and that's the fourth house of this chart that we're looking at from the moon, so that's significant too,
right,
for private, personal,
right,
happiness and things like that.
Right. So that's just my final thoughts on everything, and I think that you know, we have touched on a lot of things, and let's see, it's a full moon, so it's really great to really get out there and I guess, you know, enjoy the energy, like Alex was saying. And, you know, full moons are always great for taking advantage of heightened energy in general. A new moon is the lowest point of vitality. And so those are definitely times to rest and reflect and to take a break. But if it's a full moon, it's time for you to you know, it's definitely a good time for you to put out whatever it is that you're wanting to put out. Oh yeah, so that leads me to saying this. Since the full moon is in Gemini, this is a great time for you to speak, to communicate. If you have been thinking about what you want to say or some thoughts that you wanted to share, this would be a great time to do that. And especially in regard to wherever this is in your natal chart, you know, in the house. So communicate, express, share ideas, share information, and
do some writing.
And you know, but I would say, like, you know, publicly, right? Mm-hmm. So it's something that you're sharing publicly, not just something that you're reflecting on, like journaling.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, be mindful of Mercury retrograde as well.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, obviously, like, be careful with, take care with what you're sharing, but I think that if you apply correct discretion and scrutiny, you can express some things that will be very helpful and beneficial to those around you.
Cool. And yeah, I if I share final thoughts, they won't be final, because then we'll just go down another rabbit hole. I just keep noticing.
Okay, let's do it. I'm down.
Oh God.
Well, I've got to go soon.
Yeah, no, I think we're ending. I like I like how we're ending it. You know, this is a good 12th house for us right now, the ending of the video. But you know, there's just so many cool things that I'm seeing in the Navamsha, the 9th divisional chart, using some Gemini techniques and stuff, and it relates back to partnerships. So I'm just gonna kind of vaguely say, you know, again, like the last full moon, which you might want to watch that video that we did, there's going to be some similar themes repeated. And sort of to close out what I was saying, you know, don't, it's not about do or don't, but like be aware of, with Sagittarius so emphasized in the 7th house, be aware of like maybe aiming a little too high, especially regarding like expectations of what you're getting out of a partnership or your partner and that kind of thing. Be willing to look at things as they transpire, as like maybe there's a blind spot that one of you or either of you are not seeing, because Venus is combust and Venus is the Darakarka, which is a spouse, and Mercury is the Atmakarka, which is, you know, which is us, so to speak, or whatever. That's the person in their more, you know, soul aspect. So just keep that in mind is what I'm going to say. You know, keep that kind of theme of maybe too high of ideals and not necessarily seeing the other person, and vice versa, because I think that could be helpful. So
Right, right. Okay. So thank you for those final thoughts. And I guess in closing, all that I can really say is please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate it. And we'll have more videos coming up. We don't really have a fixed date for now, but we're gonna put out videos like about weekly, so that's what you can expect. And thanks to you guys for watching. Thanks, Lars, and thanks, James, for this beautiful session. And to everyone, enjoy the full moon and don't get trampled by Mercury retrograde.
Awesome.
All right, see you guys.
Yep. Bye.
Ciao.